If this moment were an answer you once whispered in the dark, how would you recognize it when it finally arrived? Quiet as morning light slipping across your floor, certain as breath returning after a long sigh. Perhaps it would not shout, perhaps it would not dazzle, perhaps it would simply meet you exactly where you are, with the kind of calm that does not demand, the kind of truth that does not bruise. You did not stumble here by accident, you were guided. And if you allow yourself to feel that for just a few seconds longer than is comfortable, the tightness in your chest may loosen, the noise may lower, and a wiser part of you may step forward to listen. I know the weight you carry when days feel scattered and outcomes feel uncertain, when advice multiplies and peace divides, when you are trying to do right, yet keep wondering why the ground beneath your decisions feels unsteady. You are not weak for wanting clarity, you are wise for seeking it. The search itself is a form of strength. Your nervous system has learned to live in alert mode, eyes scanning, thoughts racing, shoulders held a little too high for a little too long. That constant readiness kept you moving, but it also kept you from hearing the softer instructions that prosperity requires. Wisdom rarely forces its way into a crowded room. It waits at the door until you clear a space. So for a moment, breathe in a way that tells your body you are safe enough to consider a new path. Long inhale, longer exhale. As your breath deepens, the alarm in the amygdala quiets, and the steadier counsel of your prefrontal mind begins to glow like a lamp at dusk. This is not abstract science far from your life. This is practical spirituality meeting emotional neuroscience at your kitchen table. Calm is not a luxury. Calm is an instrument. Without it, you are pulled by urgency. With it, you are led by understanding. When the waters within you settle, the gold at the bottom becomes visible, and decisions that felt confusing begin to separate into honest weights and measures. Ancient wisdom has always linked prosperity with order, justice, and understanding. Not the loud kind of prosperity that flashes and fades, but the rooted kind that grows like a vineyard, season upon season, because the soil has been tended, the boundaries have been marked, and the harvest has been measured with truthful scales. You have seen the other kind. You have tasted the sprint, the rush, the quick yes that became a slow regret. You have watched doors open fast and close faster. You are here because something in you wants the steadier way, the way that blesses your future self and your present peace at the same time. There is a reason the heart longs for counsel while the mind reaches for plans. One without the other is tilted. Counsel without plan is a beautiful wish. Plan without counsel is a polished gamble. When you align both, you create a path that does not depend on mood or luck. Alignment is not glamorous in the moment. Alignment is humble. It looks like listening longer than you speak. It looks like writing what you will measure before you measure it. It looks like asking, what would a wise person do here? And then giving yourself enough quiet to hear the answer. Again and again, the answer arrives in the same tone, steady, honest, patient. You may worry that patience will make you late to your own life. You may fear that if you slow down, the opportunities will pass you, that if you wait for clarity, you will miss the train. But the truth is simpler and kinder. Patience is not the absence of movement. Patience is disciplined movement in the right direction. When the inner noise lowers, you do not stop, you choose. You do not shrink, you see. And what you choose from that place tends to last because it was not purchased with panic. The harvest you want will not be bullied by hurry. It will be invited by understanding. Perhaps you are remembering moments when you ignored a quiet warning because the cost of waiting felt too high, because the room was loud and time felt thin. That memory aches, but it is also a teacher. You are not being judged here. You are being welcomed into a different posture, a posture where peace is not postponed until after success, but peace becomes the way you approach success. A posture where prosperity is not a trophy you chase, but a fruit that grows from honest roots. A posture where you no longer outsource your discernment to the loudest voice, because you have learned to recognize the tone of wisdom in your own chest. Right now, Feel the chair beneath you. Notice how the body softens when it realizes there is support. The soul softens the same way when it realizes there is guidance. Guidance does not erase responsibility, it clarifies it. Guidance does not remove effort, it directs it. Guidance is the difference between swinging a sword at shadows and cutting through to what is real. If you have been exhausted by the war of opinions inside you, around you, consider that wisdom will not compete for your attention. It will wait for you to choose it. And when you do, even quietly, a door opens. You have been entrusted with time, with relationships, with resources that want stewardship more than spectacle. Stewardship is not small. Stewardship is royal. It is the art of setting just weights on the scale every day, of choosing integrity when no one is watching, of asking for counsel when pride would prefer you guess. The heart that practices this art begins to notice a new kind of confidence in ordinary moments. You find yourself less startled by change because you did not promise yourself control. You promised yourself faithfulness. You find yourself less shaken by delays because you did not anchor your hope to speed. You anchored it to truth. Listen to the quiet certainty arriving now. You were guided here to remember who you are when wisdom leads. Not a frantic collector of answers, but a patient builder of understanding. Not a tourist of ideas, but a steward of what is good. Not a victim of the calendar, but a maker of times and seasons through chosen habits and honest measures. You are allowed to begin again without shaming the person you have been. You are allowed to prosper without abandoning your peace. You are allowed to grow in a way that blesses not only your account, but your character, your relationships, and your sleep. Let this be the beginning. The moment you decide that inner quiet is not optional, that counsel is not a last resort, that integrity is not a slogan, but a system. Let this be the moment you choose to weigh today's decisions on scales that will still be true tomorrow. The path ahead will not flatter you, it will form you. It will not always be easy, it will become simpler. And as it becomes simpler, you will have more room for what matters, more room for what lasts, more room for the kind of prosperity that does not ask you to trade your soul to buy it. Stay with this calm for a few breaths more. Feel how the body thanks you when you let it stand down, how the mind clears as the fog lifts, how the heart grows larger when fear stops shouting. In this quiet, you are not empty, you are ready. In this quiet, you are not behind, you are aligned. In this quiet, you can hear the invitation that has been waiting at your door. Walk wisely, measure honestly, build patiently, and let prosperity come as a faithful witness to a well-ordered life. There is a quiet courage in you that rarely receives applause. It shows up when you wake with questions that will not leave, when you carry hope and doubt in the same chest, when you keep reaching for a wiser way even after long seasons of mixed results. You would not be here if you were satisfied with noise. You would not be here if you believed that hurry could give you peace. Your presence in this moment is proof that your heart still believes in a good future, and that belief is not naive. It is noble. You have walked through days that asked more than they returned, where your mind stayed busy while your soul stayed hungry. Your body remembers those days, the shoulders that learned to live slightly raised, the jaw that learned to hold its ground, the breath that arrived in small sips. This is not weakness. This is the imprint of long alertness written across a faithful nervous system. It worked hard to keep you safe, but it made it harder to hear the softer tones where wisdom speaks. The amygdala leans toward alarm. Wisdom leans toward alignment. When the alarm quiets, alignment becomes possible. You want prosperity that does not require you to abandon yourself. You want a way of living that blesses your house, steadies your sleep, strengthens your word. That is not greed. That is the dignity of stewardship rising to the surface. You are not asking for a spectacle. You are asking for a life that rings true when measured on honest scales. If that language moves something in you, it is because your conscience recognizes its own reflection. Just weights, clear measures, peace that does not expire when the market shifts or the calendar turns. There were times when the quick path glowed like gold and then cooled like ash in your hands. You learned how easy it is to mistake volume for truth and speed for wisdom. You noticed how a loud promise can drown the small voice that has been right all along. This noticing is a gift. It is the first repair. The second repair is gentler. It is the grace to admit that a wiser way is available and that you are allowed to choose it now without condemning the person you were when you did not know better. You can carry the lesson without carrying the shame. Not all counsel is the same. Some voices agree with your fear. Some voices agree with your calling. Wisdom teaches you to tell them apart. The heart knows when it has been seen versus sold to, when it has been guided versus pushed. Think of the 5 chairs around the table of your life. One holds a sage who asks good questions. One holds a builder who loves process. One holds a steward who respects limits. One holds a challenger who will not flatter you. One holds a mirror who reflects you without distortion. When these voices are present, decisions gain depth. When they are absent, decisions grow thin. You are not late. That sentence is worth hearing again and slowly. You are not late. Life is not a single train that left at dawn. Life is a series of gates that open when understanding arrives. There are seasons you could not rush, even if you wanted to. There are doors that were meant to appear only after you outgrew a smaller way of thinking. Guidance often looks like delay until you realize it was protection, and then it looks like timing until you realize it was love. There is a tenderness in this kind of guidance that heals as it leads. It does not mock what you tried. It honors the part of you that kept moving through fog. It speaks in sentences that feel like rest and resolve at the same time. You are not being asked to become someone else. You are being reminded of who you have always been when fear loosens its grip. Steady, honest, capable of more peace than your past allowed, capable of more prosperity than your worry would permit you to imagine. Ancient wisdom sketches a picture here and invites you to step inside it. A city with true scales at its gates. A vineyard tended in due season, a temple rising from a blueprint rather than a rush of bricks. These images are not far from your life. They are metaphors for how decisions grow when measured rightly, how habits ripen when tended patiently, how plans endure when born from counsel. Where just weights are honored, profit and peace learn to live in the same house. Your mind may still test this hope. That is natural. It remembers urgency and calls it safety. Yet even now, you can feel another rhythm gathering, something slower and stronger, like the ground finding itself under your feet. Emotional neuroscience would say that your inner alarms lower when truth is held with compassion. The soul would say that love and wisdom have begun their work. Both are true. And when both are true, the future begins to feel wide again. Let these words meet you exactly where you are. No performance necessary, no mask required. The desire for a life that is both prosperous and clean is not too much. It is the right desire. It is the ancient desire. It is the one that built cities, kept covenants, and left a blessing for those who would come after. You are that kind of person. You are the kind who cares about what your gain does to your heart. You are the kind who wants fruit that lasts. You are seen. You are understood. You are not alone in wanting a path that honors both peace and provision. If you feel a small light turning on within you, treat it as a sign that you have recognized your own name being called. Wisdom has a way of finding those who are ready for it, and readiness is not perfection. Readiness is simply the moment you admit that truth is kinder than hurry, and that integrity is stronger than noise. There is a reason the heart quiets when the word wisdom enters the room. It carries the weight of an older world where prosperity was not a sprint, but a structure, not a flash, but a foundation, not a gamble, but a measured path. Think of a doorway at dawn. Stone set upon stone, a plumb line lowered until the wall stands true. In that world, the measure comes before the money. The character comes before the gain. The order comes before the overflow. What lasts is what is aligned, and alignment is the quiet architecture that keeps a life from cracking under its own blessings. Ancient counsel spoke of honest scales as the soul of a city. That image still holds because every decision is a kind of weighing. Motive on one side, consequence on the other. When the scale is true, the decision settles without strain. When the scale is bent, everything wobbles no matter how bright it looks in the moment. Wisdom is the craft of keeping the scale honest. Understanding is the habit of checking the measure twice before you lift the next stone. Prosperity is the result that arrives when the wall has been built straight for a long time. Nothing here is loud, yet everything here is strong. The body recognizes this strength before the mind explains it. When life is measured rightly, the chest loosens and the breath grows wider. The inner alarms soften because there is nothing to hide and nothing to rush. Emotional neuroscience gives language to this relief. A calmer body lets the higher regions of thought come forward with clarity and foresight. Choices become less reactive and more rooted. Desire is no longer a storm that knocks the house apart. Desire becomes wind that fills a sail already aimed toward a worthy shore. Peace in the body is not a luxury. Peace is the soil where wise wealth grows. The pattern is simple and demanding in the most merciful way. Wisdom first, understanding next, then prosperity. The order matters because prosperity without wisdom breaks the vessel that holds it. The order matters because understanding without wisdom becomes clever error. When wisdom leads, plans are established by counsel rather than by mood. When wisdom leads, integrity is not decoration but load-bearing. When wisdom leads, time is treated as capital and patience as a multiplier rather than an enemy. In this posture, you do not chase moments. You cultivate seasons. There is a promise that lives inside this pattern, and it is quieter than the promises that wear glitter. It does not swear to erase every challenge. It does not pretend that life will stop asking for courage. It simply says that what you build with just measures will not betray you. It says that gain and peace do not need to be rivals living in separate houses. It says that a life can be abundant without being frantic, fruitful without being noisy, generous without being showy. The promise is not of spectacle, the promise is of solidity. This is why your heart has always leaned toward counsel, even when hurry pulled you elsewhere. Counsel gives depth to desire, and depth changes outcomes. A single wise voice can weigh more than a chorus of flattering noise, because truth is heavier than echo. Where counsel is honored, decisions grow roots. Where roots spread, storms lose their power to redefine you. In a rooted life, joy stops arriving as a surprise and begins returning as a visitor who knows the way home. Let the images remain close as we move forward. A blueprint unrolled on a wide table. A temple rising from careful measurements rather than from a rush of bricks. A vineyard tended by seasons that refuse to be bullied. A pair of scales that read the same at morning and at dusk. These are not distant pictures. They are ways of seeing your choices now. They are ways of lifting today's stone in a manner that can welcome tomorrow's weight. If a quiet assurance is forming in you, it is the sound of true order taking its place. From that order comes fruit that endures. From that order comes the kind of prosperity that lets you sleep. There are hours that pass like ordinary weather, and there are hours that arrive with a different air, gentle yet undeniable, as if the room itself takes one slow breath and becomes larger. This hour carries that feeling. It carries a sense of being seen without being exposed, of being invited without being pushed. The steps that led here may look small when listed on a page, yet together they form a path that feels intentional, like stones placed across a quiet stream. Something in you has been asking for alignment, and alignment tends to answer in whispers that are easy to miss and hard to forget. What looks like coincidence often hides a pattern that only reveals itself when the heart calms. Threads appear, a phrase repeats, a memory returns with new meaning. Emotional neuroscience offers a simple translation for this experience. The mind begins to notice what the soul has already named as important. Attention narrows in a generous way, not to exclude, but to honor. In that narrowing, guidance becomes visible. not a flashing sign, a steady glow, not a shout, a tone that feels familiar and safe. Many seasons have trained you to look for loud confirmations, yet the deepest confirmations rarely raise their voices. They arrive through resonance. They carry the texture of rightness rather than the drama of urgency. The body knows the difference. One tightens the jaw and quickens the pulse. The other loosens the shoulders and lengthens the breath. Peace does not mean passivity. Peace means the soul recognizes home. When recognition occurs, choices clarify without force, and the future begins to feel less like a maze and more like a road. Guidance often disguises itself as timing. A door that would not open last year swings easily today. A conversation that once led nowhere now sends light down the hallway. A page that felt dense suddenly becomes transparent, and the sentence needed most seems to lift itself from the rest. None of this erases effort. It simply redeems it. Hours that once scattered begin to gather. Effort that once felt isolated begins to belong to a larger pattern. The heart reads this pattern as care. There are also moments when guidance feels like protection, a delay that prevented a costly path, a pause that kept a promise intact. From a distance, these moments can look like lost time. Up close, they hold the shape of mercy. Ancient wisdom has always treated protection and provision as siblings. One keeps the walls true, the other fills the storehouses. Both require the same honesty of measure, the same respect for season, the same devotion to what quietly lasts. The reason this hour matters becomes clearer in that light. It meets an old desire that never surrendered, even when fatigue pressed hard. It meets the part of you that asked for a way to prosper without losing yourself, for a way to move with integrity and still arrive where hope has been pointing. The desire was never unreasonable. It was early. It waited for a structure trustworthy enough to carry it. Structure has begun to appear, not a cage, a framework. The difference changes everything. Notice how the story of your own life starts fitting together when seen from this angle. Chapters that once felt disconnected begin to speak to one another. Hard lessons contribute to current clarity. Quiet victories affirm that endurance has not been wasted. Even the missteps lend their wisdom without demanding shame as payment. This is the signature of true guidance. It builds without humiliating. It corrects without crushing. It leads without noise. The path ahead does not need fireworks to be real. It needs steadiness. It needs honest scales that read the same in daylight and in dusk. It needs the kind of patience that treats time as a partner rather than a threat. These are not new ideas for you. They are returning friends. Their return at this exact moment carries meaning. The circle tightens, not in pressure, but in focus. What matters stands closer. What distracts stands back. All of this becomes a simple confession held quietly in the heart. The sense that this meeting was not random. The sense that the hunger for peace and provision belongs to an ancient and honorable lineage. The sense that a wiser rhythm has begun to move beneath the surface of ordinary days. The old noise grows distant. The new cadence grows steady. In that steadiness, hope feels less like a visitor and more like a resident. Guidance and gratitude begin to share the same room, and the room feels like home. There is a meeting place where desire and discernment shake hands and agree to travel together. You have felt the ache of desire without direction and the chill of direction without desire. One burns out and the other dries up. When both meet, a steadier fire begins. It warms without scorching. It lights without blinding. In that light, your choices stop feeling like guesses and begin to feel like measured steps taken on solid ground. The soul does not crave more noise. The soul craves a truer rhythm. Every life is shaped by its measures, the unseen rules by which you weigh opportunities and relationships and risks become the architecture of your days. Honest scales build. Bent scales break. This is as practical as it sounds. A promise made is a promise measured. A budget kept is a measure. A boundary honored is a measure. Over time, these quiet measures do what loud intentions cannot. They align the inner world and the outer world until your word matches your action and your action matches your values. In that alignment, energy that once leaked through hidden cracks returns to you as strength. The body confirms when that strength returns. The breath lengthens, the shoulders release. The mind steps out of its whirlwind and begins to think in clear lines again. Emotional neuroscience explains that the calmer nervous system allows deeper regions of planning and foresight to take the lead. Ancient wisdom simply nods and calls it understanding. Both speak of the same mercy. A quiet body is not bored. A quiet body is available to notice what matters, available to remember what is true, available to choose without panic. Many people try to buy certainty with speed. It works for a moment. It is expensive in the end. Hurry can start a project. Hurry cannot sustain a life. When urgency drives the wheel, decisions are made to stop a feeling rather than to build a future. The relief is quick and thin. The consequences are slow and heavy. Patience is not the enemy of momentum. Patience is the friend of momentum that lasts. It listens for timing instead of bowing to pressure. It respects process instead of worshipping results. It gives the seed enough dark to grow strong enough for light. Counsel deepens this patience into wisdom. Not every voice qualifies as counsel. Counsel is not a crowd. Counsel is clarity that loves you. It will not flatter your fear. It will not decorate your preference. It will ask questions that make your motives honest. When one wise voice speaks, echoes lose their power. A single true sentence can weigh more than 100 bright opinions because truth carries the gravity of reality. Decisions that pass through real counsel tend to stand when the wind rises. They stand because they were shaped by something heavier than mood. Imagine the 5 chairs that surround the table of your life. One speaks from experience and saves you years. One thinks in systems and hands you a plan. One protects the trust that makes relationships safe. One challenges the comfortable story that keeps you small. One reflects you back to yourself without distortion so you can see what you love and what you fear. When these chairs are filled, you do not feel crowded. You feel supported. You feel like a builder who now has a level, a plumb line, a square, a map, and a lantern. Tools do not make the house for you. Tools make the house possible. Integrity remains the load-bearing wall in all of this. Without it, even brilliant structures lean and eventually fall. Integrity is not a performance. Integrity is a private decision repeated until it becomes a reputation. It is the refusal to use 2 sets of scales, one for when you gain and another for when others do. It is the quiet promise to keep the same measure at midnight and at noon. Over time, this choice does something beautiful to your confidence. You stop bracing for exposure because there is nothing hidden that needs hiding. You stop bargaining with your future because you have chosen a present that can safely grow. Prosperity that endures is not shy about numbers. It is simply not ruled by them. It treats money as a servant that carries values forward rather than a master that drags values behind. It knows that profit without peace is a loss, and that generosity without judgment can become waste. Balanced together, they create a life that can expand without tearing. Expansion then feels less like a balloon that may pop and more like a tree that lays down roots as it reaches upward. Roots first, branches next, fruit in its season. The order is not punishment. The order is kindness. Consider how even regret becomes a teacher in this light. Memory brings back the deal you forced or the warning you ignored. In the old pattern, shame would rise and lock the lesson inside a closed room. In this new pattern, compassion holds the door open so the lesson can walk into the present and change how you see. This is the alchemy that turns past pain into present wisdom. The event does not vanish, the sting does. In its place, you are left with a clearer eye and a steadier hand. There is a quiet promise moving beneath these lines, and it is not dramatic. It is reliable. If you keep the measures honest, Your life will become easier to carry even when it becomes larger to manage. If you honor counsel, your choices will feel less like wages and more like investments of self. If you treat time as a partner, your work will begin to meet you halfway. This is not a parade of instant wins. This is the long glow of a house that was built straight. You can see that glow from a distance. It does not beg for attention. It invites trust. Let the images settle. A table with 5 faithful chairs, scales that read true in every light, a wall that rises stone by stone without hurry and without a crack, a field patient enough to wait for rain and wise enough to sow before it arrives. These are pictures of a life that does not apologize for wanting both prosperity and peace. They are pictures of a life that refuses to trade the soul in order to fund the future. They are pictures of a life that has learned the rhythm of wisdom first, understanding next, prosperity that endures. In a quiet city built near the meeting of river and road, there lived a keeper of waits whose stall stood by the gate. Travelers came with grain warm from distant fields, with oil that smelled of sunlight, with wool that held the memory of winter. All of it passed over his table. On one side sat the scale that measured price. On the other side sat the scale that measured something no one could see. He called it the measure of the soul. People smiled at the phrase and said it sounded poetic. He only nodded and went on with his work. At first the days were ordinary, and the market moved like a calm tide. Measure, exchange, nod, and part. Then a season arrived when gold spoke louder than character. A man with quick hands and bright promises appeared at the gate. He laughed easily, he praised loudly, and he carried a small advantage inside his sleeve. His sacks weighed a breath lighter than his words. The keeper felt the tremor in the first moments, yet the coin glittered and the city needed trade. He watched the scale of price settle and watched the other scale hesitate, as if a wind had entered the stall and lifted the pans. He slept that night with a stone behind his ribs and pretended it was nothing. The weeks that followed were profitable and thin at the same time. The ledgers grew, while a quiet unease pressed against the edges of the room. The keeper noticed how often he reached for the comfort of numbers to drown the murmurs of conscience. The body does not lie when the soul is ignored. His shoulders gathered toward his ears. His breath shortened into careful sips. He became quick to speak and slow to listen. Emotional neuroscience would say a constant alarm had taken the wheel. Ancient wisdom would say the scales had begun to disagree. Both say the same thing in different tongues. One evening, an old woman placed a small bundle of figs on the table. The fruit was humble yet perfect. The scale of price was satisfied at once. The other scale waited, as if listening. Her eyes held the kind of kindness that needs no announcement. She told a small story about the year the river ran low and how the city kept its promises anyway. The keeper felt the stone behind his ribs move. He looked at the bundle of figs and felt the weight of his own life beside it. Sometimes truth arrives wearing a plain cloak. Sometimes correction tastes sweet. He began to watch his own hands again. He began to hear the tone hidden beneath words. The man with the quick laugh returned with brighter promises and lighter sacks. This time the keeper noticed the way his own breath narrowed and refused to widen near that smile. The body often recognizes a lie before the mind assembles the sentence. The keeper did not make a speech and did not strike the table. He simply set the weights with the care of a priest and waited. The scale of price settled. The other scale rose and would not come down. The stall turned quiet. The man laughed harder. The keeper did not laugh. The man left without a sale, and the air felt cleaner than profit. News of the moment traveled as it always does. Some called the keeper stubborn. Some called him old-fashioned. Some called him a guardian. He did not change his posture in response to names. He changed his posture in response to what the scales revealed. Day by day, he noticed that when the two scales agreed, the whole body eased, and the city breathed differently. Bakers lingered in conversation. Children ran past the stall without the hush of worry that used to follow them. Merchandise still moved, and coin still changed hands, but the sound of trade no longer scraped the ears. It rang like a bell. A stormy year arrived and tested everything that looked noble in calmer weather. Harvest ran thin and tempers grew sharp. The keeper faced offers that would have made a poorer man rich and a richer man restless for years. He stayed with the practice that had returned his peace. The two scales must agree. If the measure of price praised a deal, while the measure of the soul refused to settle, he let the moment pass like a caravan that did not stop in this city. When both measures settled together, even small trades felt like architecture. They held, they carried weight without cracking. One night near the end of that hard year, a candle flickered on his table while the city slept. He placed a single coin on the scale and then stood still. The coin balanced perfectly on the visible measure and felt heavier on the other. He understood then what his work had been teaching him in 1,000 quiet ways. Every exchange purchases something more than goods. It purchases a future. It purchases a name. It purchases sleep or the loss of it. When the scales agree, the purchase is clean. When they disagree, the price is paid later with interest no ledger can track. The city did not become perfect because one man kept honest weights. The city became safer to love. People began to notice how often they returned home without the tightness in the chest that once traveled with them after market days. They noticed that promises felt bigger than transactions, and that a hand extended in trade also extended a kind of shelter. The river rose again in its season. The roads filled. The keeper grew older and smiled easily. He no longer needed to defend his method. The fruit of it stood everywhere he looked. Years later, when the man with the quick laugh arrived again with grey at his temples, the meeting contained no drama. He placed his goods on the table, and for the first time the second scale settled. Something in him had changed, and the scales heard it before anyone spoke. They completed a simple trade that felt like a repaired line in a piece of music, and the city exhaled a note of release. Mercy is never loud. It is simply heavier than shame. The parable is not far from the lives that unfold beyond that gate. Each day sets something on the table and waits to see which way the pans will lean. The measure of price is necessary and clear. The measure of the soul is quieter and no less real. When they agree, a house feels steadier, a name feels truer, and even hard seasons lose some of their sharpness. When they agree, prosperity does not need to apologize for existing beside peace. When they agree, rest returns to its bed and the night grows kind again. The keeper's story ends in a simple room with a window that opens to the river. He closes his stall at dusk and watches the water carry light. He thinks of the old woman and her figs, of the noisy man who grew quieter, of the years that threatened to bend the scales and failed. He does not bless himself for heroism. He blesses the practice that kept his heart from becoming a ledger and his ledger from becoming a heart. Two scales in one room, two measures that learned to agree, a city that learned to breathe, a prosperity that did not have to trade its soul to be real. There is a quiet ritual that steadies scattered days and gives shape to desire, a simple conversation between the heart and the page, unhurried and private, small enough to fit inside an evening. It does not perform, it does not impress, it simply gathers the threads of a day and lays them beside one another until patterns appear. 10 minutes can carry a surprising weight when honesty is allowed to sit at the table without fear. Many discover that clarity grows when a single day is held to a gentle light. One line recalls where peace was present and why. Another line notices where hurry tried to bargain for control. A third remembers a moment when counsel spoke and how the body responded. Shoulders relaxed, breath widened, or the chest tightened and asked for more light. Emotional neuroscience would say the observing mind begins to lead the reactive mind, and the nervous system thanks you by softening its grip. Ancient wisdom would say, understanding has entered the room. Both descriptions point to the same kindness. Some evenings bring a measure of provision to the page. A small gain appears, steady and clean, not because the world suddenly changed its rules, but because integrity kept its promise. The numbers do not stand alone. They are read beside the motives that carried them and the relationships that held them. Profit that cost peace is counted differently than profit that increased peace. The scale remains honest when both measures are remembered. The soul recognizes the difference and rests easier when the account is true. On other nights, the page receives regret without turning it into punishment. The memory of a hurried yes, the echo of a boundary ignored, the sting of a voice that flattered rather than guided. Written without drama, these moments lose their sharpest edges and return as teachers. The line between shame and wisdom becomes clear in this quiet. Shame isolates and freezes. Wisdom includes and redirects. The lesson stays, the heaviness leaves. The body can tell when the difference has been honored. There are pages that celebrate counsel, the voice that asked a better question, the friend who loved truth more than approval, the mentor who reminded you of your first values when the crowd felt loud. Naming these gifts trains attention to find them again, and attention is a form of stewardship. Where attention goes, energy follows. Where energy follows, growth prefers to live. The table of 5 chairs becomes real rather than imagined when gratitude remembers their names. Rhythm grows from this practice, the way a vineyard grows along a trellis, not as a restriction, but as a shape that protects fruit. Weeks begin to show a cadence. Effort and rest start speaking to one another with respect. Money is noticed as a servant that moves values forward rather than as a master that drags values behind. The mind stops negotiating with shadows because measures have become visible. When measures become visible, choices stop feeling like wagers and start feeling like clear agreements with the future. Some nights carry nothing dramatic, and that is often the best sign. A day lived within honest measures tends to end without noise. The page records ordinary faithfulness, and the body answers with ordinary calm. Sleep arrives without bargaining. Morning does not need to repair what evening ruined. The house feels straight because each stone was set with care, and houses built that way become easier to expand without strain. Over time, the ledger turns into a mirror that refuses to flatter and refuses to condemn. It simply reflects what is true, and truth is kinder than fear when fear has had its say and finished its work. You begin to see how patience multiplies outcomes that pressure only pretends to offer. You begin to trust the slow build because it continues to stand when bright shortcuts collapse. You begin to notice that prosperity and peace can live in the same room when the measures stay honest. What starts as a small evening ritual quietly rewrites the story of a life. Decisions that once borrowed energy from tomorrow begin to repay what they owed. Boundaries that once felt heavy begin to feel like guardians. Opportunities that once dazzled begin to reveal their motives in the light of a few careful lines. The ledger teaches a language that the heart already knew. Wisdom first, understanding next, prosperity that endures. And as the pages gather, a name gathers with them, not the name others give in passing, but the name that returns to you when you are alone and at peace. A person who can be trusted, a person whose word and measure agree, a person whose success does not need apology because it was not bought with a divided soul. In that name, the night grows kind, and the future begins to feel like a friend who knows the way home. There comes a point when the many paths you have walked stop competing and begin to form a single road. You can feel it in the way your breathing steadies. You can sense it in the way your thoughts stop circling and start moving in one direction with quiet strength. The scattered lessons of hard years, the small fidelities of ordinary days, the moments of protection that felt like delay, they gather and agree. What once looked like fragments begin to read like a design. The design is not loud. The design is honest. Wisdom first, understanding next, prosperity that can stay. You have learned that the body keeps the score of the soul, that when the inner scales disagree, the shoulders rise and the night turns narrow, that when the measures align, the chest opens and sleep returns with a kind face. This knowledge is not abstract. It is felt. It is the difference between spending a life on repairs and living a life that can carry weight without cracking. Emotional storms still come, but they do not define the season. Pressure still visits, but it does not appoint itself as your guide. A truer voice has taken the chair at the head of the table, and the room has changed because of it. You have seen how counsel enlarges you, not through applause but through questions that make the heart honest. You have seen how patience rescues desire from panic and gives it time to become character. You have seen how integrity repairs the bridge between your name and your future, so that gain does not have to apologize to peace. Even regret has been invited into a kinder economy. It brings its wisdom and leaves its sting at the door. This is what true guidance does. It builds without bruising. It corrects without humiliating. It leads without noise. The images remain close because they have become true. The blueprint on the table that protects you from building a room you do not need. The vineyard that proves time can be a partner rather than a threat. The two scales that read the same at sunrise and at dusk. These are not just pictures now. They are habits with roots. They are the quiet laws of a house that will be safe to expand. They are the reason your hope does not have to whisper anymore. Hope can speak in a normal voice because it has something solid to stand on. Prosperity in this light is not a prize that requires you to trade your soul. It is a witness that your measures are true. It is the sound a life makes when peace and provision learn to share the same room. It is grain that weighs what it says it weighs. It is a contract that does not require a second story to explain it. It is generosity that remembers the limits that make it sustainable. There is beauty here that does not fade with headlines. There is strength here that does not need a crowd. Some will call this slow. Let them. Slowness in the right direction is speed no storm can cancel. Some will call this simple. Let them. Simplicity after depth is the most demanding honesty of all. It means nothing hidden needs to hold the roof up. It means the house is straight and the doors open and close without protest. It means your word does not shake when it is spoken, and your rest does not run when the calendar fills. Perhaps you can feel gratitude rising like a tide that does not rush. Gratitude for the seasons that taught you what brightness without roots really costs. Gratitude for the voices that loved you enough to slow you down. Gratitude for the quiet rituals that put the day in order and gave your nervous system a way home. Gratitude for the patience that felt like loss until it revealed itself as protection. Gratitude for the grace that kept defending your future even while you learned the language of honest scales. The hour we share does not end with fireworks. It ends with a steady light that wants to live in your ordinary rooms. That light tells the truth about you. You are not a collector of frantic wins. You are a builder of enduring good. You are not a stranger to wisdom. You are someone who recognizes its tone and answers to your own name when it calls. You are not late. You are aligned. The past is not a chain. It is a teacher that now sits quietly while you face forward. Hold one question as a companion as the day continues. If wisdom became your first measure in every choice that matters, what kind of person would you become, and what kind of prosperity would be trusted to find you?